What's the most condescending piece of advice you received from someone who assumed you were poorer or less educated than them? I'm a film producer. I look 20 but I'm significantly older and more experienced than I look. I'm also a woman, which can get you mixed results on the best of days. On set, I just type away at my laptop and do menial work just to make sure all the holes are plugged up and no one is shitting the bed. I guess one camera assist saw this and thought I was a PA. His response was to flash me a handbook for the fancy camera we were using and tell me to read up, so you'll actually learn something. I asked him what the fuck he thought I was doing, asked his name, and made it clear that I paid his bills. God, every time I tell people I work from home as a romance author, you can see in their faces they mentally adjust my IQ to something significantly below zero. I then get to listen to their oh so original ideas for the novel they're either going to write when they retire, or have been working on for the past 5+ years. Men especially love to give me writing tips and advice and suggestions. I've been writing for 20 years. I'm very niche. Queer fantasy romance, but good at what I do and popular in my tiny circle. I seldom make less than 5k a month and have several awards to my name. But thanks for the advice, bro. A lady at an office job I had for a short time saw that I was new and decided to try to teach me how to copy and paste on the computer since we use it a lot. She got mad and accused me of not listening to her when I did it by using Ctrl+C Ctrl+V instead of her method, which was edit, copy, put cursor in desired spot, then edit, paste. She wanted me to do it again, so I did Ctrl+Z to undo everything we had just done. Got mad and started screaming at me undo, not realizing I had literally just done that, since the only correct way is edit, undo. She then brought in a younger person to teach me how to set up my email signature. I simply went to the icon that had a drop down that said edit signature or something similar and brought up the window. The younger person said no, that's the wrong one. Let me show you where it is, and went through at least 3 different menus only to get to the exact same window. She insisted that was the right one and denied it was the exact same one. The older lady brought the younger lady in to teach me because she's the best here at computers. They both got mad at me for not listening. Older lady went to complain to my supervisor about my unwillingness to learn how to use the computer. I was only in that job while I waited to hear back from developer jobs. ACO. Worker treats everyone he works with as a first-year apprentice and talks to people like they are stupid despite having the lowest level of education, that is, he just has his basic trade certificates while those around him have all gone on to higher education. He also has the least amount of skills and experience, as in he is an average welder fabricator, whereas those around him can also do fitting work and or machining. I had just started with the company, so I got the job of working with him because no one else would, and he tried to explain to me how to use a bandsaw like I was a child. I told him to fuck off and that I would do the job myself. So far he hasn't spoke to me since, which is a bonus in itself. Gig night. Still a few bands to go before we go on stage. I'm at the bar checking people out and having beers, because stuff's boring. Guy comes up to me, sees my band shirt, doesn't recognize me, which is totally okay. I like it better that way. Proceeds to nag my ears off about our music, trying real hard to go into technical musicalities, which again, is okay. You do you. Up until the point where he slams one of my songs, saying he doesn't get why the fuck it's in F minor. I tell him he must be mistaken, because the song is very much in A minor. Douche says you obviously don't have the necessary musical capabilities to recognize the correct tonality when you hear it. Come back when you've actually taken some music lessons. Bitch, I wrote the thing. It's in A minor. I've been playing it for years. In A minor. The mom of one of my sons, very wealthy, friends offered to drive my son home after a playdate at the friend's house, instead of assuming that I could pick up my son, because she wasn't sure if I had a car, since she always saw me walking around town and biking longer distances. Parking is scarce in my town and I like being active, so I rarely bother driving if my destination is less than a few miles. I thought it was kind of her to offer to drive my son home, and funny that she thought I didn't have a car. I have a car. I chose to live with my parents even after I finished my education and had the means to move out on my own because my mother was always ill and needed the help. An acquaintance mentioned to me one time at a party in front of everyone that she earns $65,000 a year, which is why she's able to live on her own, and I should aim for a salary like that so I could finally be self-sufficient. I smiled at her. I was making six figures. My mom runs into this all the time. No specific examples exactly, but people will talk down to her or treat her badly because all they see is a jobless single mom on disability. What they don't know is she got her undergraduate summa cum laude, and then her mals from Dartmouth College while she was pregnant with me. This was while being married to a toxic, abusive jerk and struggling with physical and mental health issues. She is my hero and I'm very proud of her. I posted this like a year ago. So I was at a bar with a friend of mine and we got to talking with this girl who was there on her 21st birthday. We congratulate her and buy her around. Shortly thereafter we get into a conversation about the peopling of South America. She then, incredibly arrogantly, explains that there were people there and that I'm whitewashing history. I explain, again, that I'm not, and that there were no human beings there until they migrated there at a time we're still trying to figure out. No, she insists. These invaders wiped out the indigenous populations. No, I say, that happened thousands of years later. She accuses me of mansplaining. I'm like, at a loss, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm sorry. She yells at my friend, female, and is like, how are you friends with him, and is like, God, what do you even do? Like, self-fucking stocks? I'm a geographer. I bartend, so I get a lot of that shit. It used to annoy me because it was always unsolicited. I understand it though, especially from people who have never been a bartender before, so they don't understand how much money you can make. One time though I actually had to laugh at that guy. He was a regular and came in for lunch with his employees at least twice a week. Friendly bunch and always tipped well. We started talking about the kind of work they did and whatnot. They had a small company that did residential electrical work. Said that I should come by and drop a resume off if I ever wanted to get a real job. I entertained him and asked about pay, hours, benefits, etc. He then told me I could start out at $11 an hour and within a year or two be up to $14 an hour. Which isn't terrible, but it was the way he said it that pissed me off. Normally I don't tell patrons what I make, but this time I had to because he was coming off like he'd be doing me a huge favor. So I told him thanks but no thanks. Even at $15 an hour I'd be taking a 50% pay cut. Sure, there were benefits which he reminded me of, but I'm sorry, $15 at 40 hours a week is $600 before taxes. I could make that in less than 2 shifts. At 30 years old my wife and I looked like we were right out of high school. Good genetics, I guess. On our son's first visit to the doctor after being born, a nurse, who was maybe 10-15 years older than us, flat out treated us like teenage parents, scolding us for things we'd actually not done wrong, like how to hold a baby, how to make sure we kept them warm enough, etc. And just overall treating us like kids. I already had an MBA and my wife a PhD, and we're pretty cautious and responsible people. I'll never forget the laugh we had after she walked out of the room. I finished uni and started working as a nurse in an operating theater. I was only 21 at the time and male, so everyone assumed I was an orderly and not an RN. First day an older lady who was an orderly starts giving me advice on how to do really basic things and bossing me around. I didn't let her in on my secret, just let her go on in her condescending way. Boy, did she get her nose out of joint when they let the new orderly scrub in for an op. She really was a bitch. At age 19, 2005, I was replacing the fuel sending unit in my mother's car on a Saturday afternoon. Pretty standard job. Disconnect the lines. Drop the tank straps. Tank basically falls out in your hands. Easy peasy. It's an intimidating task for the first 2 or 3 times, but then you figure out the secret to all mechanicdom. There's not a single part on an automobile you can't remove and reinstall successfully if you're reasonably detail-oriented and cautious. One of my uncle's friends, classical greatest generation asshole, showed up to visit and quietly, by def senior standards, asked my uncle, he's always struck me as kind of useless, All I've known him to do is computer stuff. Does he know what he's doing? Meanwhile, 3 weeks earlier he'd brought his prized vintage and very rusted out, worn out 1960 Chevrolet C20 pickup to a local mechanic's shop to have it fixed. It had spun, stacked, a bearing, and he'd opted to have the engine rebuilt while it was in the shop. If Mr. Greatest Generation had bothered to speak to the lowly mechanic rather than just hobnobbing with his wealthy pal who owned the shop, he'd have learned that I was the mechanic who had rebuilt the engine in his prized clapped out shitbox pickup. I was 16 and working a retail part-time job after high school hours, so it was like 5 PM. A 30-something woman came in with their 10-ish-year-old child and said, "See honey, this is why you stay in school and go to college, so you don't end up like her." Then she came up to me and said, "I'd advise you to stay in school, but clearly your parents didn't raise you well enough." I was a reference librarian for many years. I'm retired now. While on duty one Saturday afternoon, I was approached by a gentleman accompanied by a young woman. The guy was obviously trying to impress the lady with his superior intelligence and research skills. He was certain the such a resource existed and he had used it right there in my department many times. I was certain he was confusing it with something else, but I was super courteous, of course, because that's my job. He was obnoxious as hell, kept interrupting me while I was trying to explain what was what. The lady seemed real embarrassed. Finally I started ignoring the guy and just addressed the lady. The guy stomped away into the book stacks to find it himself. Without his interference, the lady and I were able to figure out what she needed. It was in a totally different section of the library, and they left. On her way out, the lady shot me a captivatingly beautiful smile which I remember to this day. On his way out he slipped $2 into my shirt pocket as a tip. He thought he was insulting me. Being right is the best revenge. I worked at a grocery store once. A group of me and a few other employees were entertaining an older man when he suddenly asked about the frequency of how often we get our paychecks. We kind of awkwardly answered, and he got a little twinkle in his eye and he threw a little "what a great lesson in saving and money management that must be." We were all in our mid to late 20s, and didn't really say anything until he walked away. He seemed a bit ignorant to the fact that we kind of had to be experts in that field in order to pay our bills every month or we were fucked out a place to live. I worked as a retail manager and one of my staff asked me how to input a % off coupon in the till, as they had only done $ off coupons before. The customer asked us for a calculator to show us how to calculate a percentage. I was going to a top engineering school at the time and my staff member went to a prestigious university as well. We just gave each other a look and I taught her how to enter the discount into the till. The assumptions made by the customer that we were uneducated pissed me off, but I don't mind being underestimated.